I'm going to give that saw some test time. I want to see how it deals with getting warm and how much it vibrates with that goofy flywheel and the like. I've been watching with some interest online too. We got some guys going through and trying to build those MS660s. It's certainly not a paint by numbers project. They're a fairly substantial project to build from scratch, and sometimes you take your skills for granted. When I built those, I had to learn quite a bit as I went along and had to acquire some tools, and it was definitely worth it for me. Some people, you know, it may be something best left to dealers and to the professionals, and others, they'll charge into it and go through a series of ups and downs and disappointments, but I guarantee you if they get it done out the other side, they'll have learned an awful lot, number one, and number two, we'll have an appreciation for the true professionals in the chainsaw business world, because some of the stuff isn't trivial. But there is one concern I do have with all this, and from time to time I have to put up a little video and cover some of my thoughts on the safety side. Did that a few years back and nobody watched the video, so I took it down, but I'm going to start putting more into my videos. These saws, the little saws, you know, they're in the homeowner class and people see them as innocuous. They're not. It doesn't matter if it's a homeowner saw or that big steel, or in that case farmer tech. All those saws can create a heck of a mess in a hurry if you don't know what you're doing. So I stress, if you're going to build those things, well, that's great, that's good. If you've got chainsaw background, then I'm wasting my time talking to you. But if you don't, and you see that as a cool puzzle, which it is, please get some training before you run the darn thing, especially the big ones. Boy, they're powerful. Those farmer techs are so powerful. You know, these little things here, the biggest problem I have with these type of things is a lot of people who've got chainsaw experience, they take it for granted. They're just small and how can they hurt you? But they can. So, like, you know, I wear my chaps, I wear my helmet and face mask, and I stress and have before, please, 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 if you do this stuff, the professionals know, but even if you're not a professional, do not, absolutely do not skimp on the safety of this thing. You know, learn how to operate the chainsaw. If you don't have a manual that comes with a new saw, well, see if you can't find some training, whether it's from a professional logger or from the pay-for classes. And second, do not, and I say do not skimp on your PPEs. Make sure you have your chaps, you have your steel toe shoes, and you have your helmet, because the downside if you don't and something happens is so severe. It's just so severe. So I can't stress that enough. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is take the 254, I don't know, maybe the Husqvarna 1, and chop down some of this grass and get into a ash tree that I took down a while back, and then run the 254 and the 51 to see how they compare. Alright, I'm going to take a couple of cuts here. What I want to do is I want to see if I can break that log and not have it cave in, and have a place where I can do a couple of test cuts with both the 254 and the 51, so you can get an order of magnitude about power. I mean, you know what the 254 is like because you've seen it run. What about a 254 closed port cylinder on a very similar case as compared to a 51 open port homeowner grade saw? This was a homeowner grade saw from back in the 90s. You know, how does one perform relative to the other? And that's what I want to do. I just finished putting these together. The 254 a few weeks back and the 51 this last weekend. So it needs to get warmed up anyway. But to me, that's just raw data. It's interesting stuff. So I'll start talking now and get to cutting. that's the 254. That one's pretty good, huh? Now remember, this is the one that basically was trashed. And I probably put it on the tack. I think it's running a little bit lean on top, but it really runs good for what it is. That's an open port cylinder. It's got a muffler mod, and I had to deck the cylinder in order to get it down to 20,000 squish. And I've got that on video. But for what it is, it's just not bad at all. It's a good running little saw. So I think the point here is, even with a saw like this, being a hobbyist, you can make it run better than it was, and that's fun. I mean, this to me is instant gratification, because this was not a running saw when I got it, and now it runs quite well. I think only Bob will know whether or not it runs well relative to a stock 51, but based on what I was seeing, the way the compression was, I bet this one handily outcuts a stocker. I bet it does. I think the only thing I need to do now is make sure it's in fact oiling. That looks a little dry for me, but it obviously has some oil. Now let me see what we got. Then I'll put it on the tack and see if I can't. By the way, I didn't really do much to the carburetor. The only thing I did to it was make it run and then kind of tune it by ear. So this has not had the benefit of the digital tachometer. And the other thing I did was I did sharpen the chain, because the chain was beyond whooped. And I changed both the amount of gullet it has on the teeth, because it didn't have enough gullet the way it was, and I also got the rakers down to, like, I don't know, 25 thousandths, which, because it's not a very powerful saw, it's not a huge bite, but it's more than enough, obviously, to cut through this hard ash. This is a dead ash tree, and that's hard. It's not rotted at all. It's quite solid. You can see the kind of chips we're getting. That one was a new chain, but I hit something with it, so I had to touch it up. But no excuses. It obviously cuts quite well too. And remember, this was the dead saw Salvage 254, and I'm going to run that pretty much all fall. And it too, just like this, would be an ugly duckling for a lot of people, in that it's got a busted fin, it's got a bunch of things that are no good, just like this 51. But as Bob likes to say over and over again, both of these saws would put wood on the truck. Both of these saws would be decent firewood saws. And this 51 is actually cutting better than I expected it to, with that tiny little carburetor it has. Jeez. But you know, I guess that's the definition of win, isn't it? So anyway, let me see if it fires right back up, and then I want to see if it oils. It's oiling. Certainly not as good as I'd like. You see that right there? Got plenty of bar oil. Sometimes it's just the bar. So when we go back to tune it by tack, I'll check the bar to make sure it's actually coming out. You know, actually I'm going to make one more set of cuts. I was heating up the 562 to test hot start and got over to this stuff here. So I'm going to take a couple of cuts with a 562 and then go through and try to get a cut done with those smaller saws. I'm going to do the 562 on the one side and then smaller saws on the other, which is actually a little bit larger in diameter, possibly. And this is, again, not supposed to be some kind of a race. It's just orders of magnitude. You know, a lot of guys read way too much into these times. And this is also after this 562 has been heat soaked a little bit. See if it restarts. That's my hot start. Alright, 254 next on the other side, which is roughly the same diameter. That's my hot start. Alright, well, this is not broken in, and that's still roughly the same. Let's give this one a shot. See if it restarts. I think that's a good enough test. I really don't have a lot of room. I start getting into this branch over here, but that'll give you a sense as to one relative to the next, you know. Again, not by seconds, but by orders of magnitude. And I've said this a whole bunch of times. Sometimes I feel like it needs repeating though. When you see these YouTube videos of chainsaws cutting through logs, you really don't, you really can't take too much away other than the fact that the saw cuts wood well. You know what I'm saying? Because without the same bar and chain, and even if it is the same bar and chain, there's some wear, you know, there's temperatures, there's tune, there's so many variables that can skew to make one saw look faster than the other. It's not even funny. So I think the only value of these test cuts that I'm doing here is to verify things like plug checks to make sure it's running well, and to give you a sort of a sense of orders of magnitude of how well the saw cuts. And what I took away from these last couple of cuts here is that all three of those saws would be good firewood saws. Obviously the 562 is faster. That 254 is quicker than you think. That darn thing's got some power. And that 51, that thing runs strong. That's a strong running little saw, you know, for what it is. And you always have to qualify for what it is, you know. It was the homeowner saw of its day. So anyway, I think I'm just going to wrap it up instead of going back and doing a whole lot of tuning, because I think that little 51 runs just fine. I don't think I have to do much to it. I still put it on the tack, I think. I think I'm going to give it a little more fuel on top just to be safe, but fact of the matter is I think it runs just fine. So anyway, I think that's going to be it for now. Don't know if I'm going to put on my rant about the MS660s or not. So am I allowed to brag a little bit? That FarmerTech 56mm saw on the end, 562 and the 254, which are going to be my primary work saws this fall, are all, depending on who you talk to, they all started as piles of junk. Don't get mad at me now, you got to listen to my logic. If you're a steel guy, aftermarket parts from the Pacific Rim are going to be the definition of junk because you're a steel guy. But it was a pile of parts, and yes, it has definitely exceeded my expectation levels. That's a great saw. That 562 was a 2012 early version with 5 screw cases that was just blown up. And I salvaged a cylinder and replaced the cases and did my, you know, my basic modifications to the muffler and all that, and that thing runs great. Those total bars, the super bars, the light ones like that, I love them. I will say that they do flex more than a solid bar, and they actually seem to flex just a little bit more than the Sugiharas. So if that's an issue to them, if that's an issue for you, you probably won't like them. But I do, because they are light, and especially on the big FarmerTech there, it makes that saw something that I can creep into normal saw use with. It doesn't give me a backache. Whereas when I had a standard weight bar with a buck and spike, it kind of tipped it over the edge to something I didn't want to pick up. It's actually a toss-up between those two saws, which one I grabbed first. The 562 wins because it starts so easy and restarts easy. Today's actually a very warm day, so it was a time for me to try to replicate some of the hot start issues, which I was not able to do. I ran it through a bunch of cookies and just run it straight to try to get the temperature up, and then I shut it off and tried to restart. It was a 1-pull restart, and I've been doing that on and off all summer long, trying to see if I can replicate that situation with that saw. The 254 was literally a pile of junk, so both that 562 and the 254 literally started as junk. They were throwaway saws. And that 51 was a dead saw that I brought back to life for a friend, so it's not part of my work rotation. But all 4 of those saws in a normal world would be tough to replicate. And I have a bunch of subscribers who I believe could replicate any one of them. They have the skills and the desire and that sense of adventure when it comes to mechanical things to dive into those. And I do want to stress, none of this stuff is picture book, paint by the numbers type of a project. All of them require a little bit of zigs and zags, testing your mechanical skills. But to me, that's what part of the fun is, having to solve the problems. And all those saws, all 4 of them, presented their own special blend of issues to solve, but that was part of the fun for me. And I guess I'll close by saying, if that's not fun for you, or if you just want to pick it out of a square and put it into another square the way it's supposed to work and have everything work cleanly, this is not for you, because every one of those saws, whether it's stripped out threads in the 254 or the bad cases on the 562, or trying to figure out how to do some of the more difficult things on the 660, require a little bit of tenacity and ingenuity. Actually, on the 660, the hardest thing for me to do, and you're going to laugh, because I found an easy way once I had gone through them, and I look back and laugh, but getting the anti-vibe bushings in, that was tough for me. I had a hard time with that on that particular saw. Subsequent saws I got easier, I got a little smarter, but that first one was hard. But anyway, dead saw salvage for the Husqvarna 51 Part 2 is now done. That's good enough. Well, there's plenty of oil around the area. Let me just fire it up and see if I can see it pumping out. And I don't really know if these have got those adjustable oil pumps like some do. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it sure is coming out of there. So it's oiling. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And you stick it back together, and I think if anything, I need to put a little oil in that bearing. Hear it? So anyway, over and out.